Hello, I'm Ashley Strauss-Martin, General Counsel for the Realtors Association of New Mexico. As you all know, on November 1st, we will be releasing some changes to Form 1106, the Exclusive Right to Sell Listing Agreement, and to Form 2104, the Residential Purchase Agreement. We have previously released 3 videos, one that covered the changes to 1106, one that covered all changes to 2104 except for the changes regarding the time off-market fee, also referred to as the TOM fee, and one that covered only the TOM fee changes to Form 2104. Since the release to membership of the new TOM fee concept and language, we have received a number of comments and questions. For the most part, you, our membership, have expressed optimism that this TOM fee will accomplish what we hope it will, which is to significantly reduce the number of earnest money disputes we see. I want to thank you all for keeping an open mind about these changes, as I know change can be difficult. You also raised some questions and concerns about the TOM fee, which the Forms Committee considered at their meeting the beginning of October. As a result of further consideration of a couple of the issues, we have made a few small changes to the TOM fee language and process, which I will cover in this video today. First, let me remind you that the TOM fee is a fee that goes directly from the buyer to the seller. The title companies will not be involved in the collection, holding, or disbursement of the TOM fee. So logistically, how will this occur? Let's first assume a scenario where there are 2 brokers, a listing broker and a buyer's broker, and let's assume the buyer is paying by check. The buyer will give the TOM fee to the buyer's broker, who would deliver the TOM fee to the listing broker. The listing broker would be responsible for delivery of the TOM fee to the seller. Brokers are accustomed to exercising reasonable care in getting earnest money and other documents to the applicable recipient as soon as practical, and this will be no different. Now, in the case where there is one broker representing both buyer and seller, delivery of the TOM fee from the buyer to the broker will constitute delivery to the seller. This has been clarified in paragraph 30F of the purchase agreement. Also, we have created a form for the receipt of the TOM fee to assist with the tracking of the TOM fee. We, the association, in no way require you to use this form, but it would be prudent to have some way to prove that you have received and delivered the TOM fee as required, assuming the TOM fee has been given to you to deliver. In some cases, the buyer and seller may have a PayPal or a Venmo account, and the money could be transferred directly from the buyer to the seller, in which case you would not be involved in that. Secondly, recall the point of not involving the title company in the TOM fee. As explained in the last video, the point of the TOM fee is to give the buyer an opportunity to conduct most of his inspections and review the seller's disclosure statement and decide if he wishes to proceed with the transaction. If the buyer does wish to continue, but has objections, the parties are given an opportunity to come to an agreement on the buyer's objections. If buyer doesn't wish to continue after objections, or the parties cannot come to an agreement on the buyer's objections, the purchase agreement terminates, but there is no need to deal with the distribution of earnest money because it has not been delivered to the title company. If the parties are able to resolve the buyer's objections, or if the buyer has no objections, then the earnest money is then delivered to the title company. But as we know, there are typically 2 documents that get signed when a deal terminates: the earnest money distribution form and the termination agreement. Now, if earnest money has not been delivered to the title company when the deal terminates, there will be no need for an earnest money distribution form. However, if the title company has started title work on the property, they may still require a termination agreement. This really depends on the title company's policy. Some of the companies will not require a termination agreement if the original close date on the first contract has passed. However, others will, even if the closing date on the first contract has passed. So, if the buyer is unwilling to sign a termination agreement, the seller may be required to change title companies when he gets the next offer in on the property, which brings us to our next 2 changes. Let's talk about paragraph 21 first. In paragraph 21H, we say that if the buyer wishes to terminate based on inspections, that he will do so in writing. So generally, buyers are submitting a signed termination agreement if they terminate the contract after inspections. However, while the contract states that if the parties cannot come to resolution by the resolution deadline, the contract will terminate, it does not affirmatively require the parties to sign a termination agreement if the parties cannot come to an agreement on how to cure the buyer's objections. We have now added language to paragraph 20I, the resolution paragraph, that states that, upon termination, the party shall execute a termination agreement, RANM Form 5105. This may assist the seller in getting a termination signed, so that the seller may use the same title company next time he goes under contract on the property. With all this said, please keep in mind that getting an agreement signed requires the parties to, well, agree. And that does not always happen, as we have seen with the earnest money issues. So despite our fine new language, there may still be circumstances under which a buyer refuses to sign a termination agreement, and a seller will be forced to change title companies when he gets another offer on his property. Which brings me to the second change on this subject. Paragraph 15 is the examination of title paragraph, and in it, we have made a change that allows the parties ordering the title commitment to choose when the title commitment will be ordered, either upon date of acceptance, as we've always done, or on the date the TOM fee is delivered, or on the date earnest money is delivered. Why would we give these options? Well, as previously discussed, once a title company starts title work on a property, if the deal terminates, the title company will want a termination agreement. And if a seller is unable to get a buyer to sign a termination agreement, despite our clear and unambiguous new language, then the seller may have to move to another title company to close the transaction with the next buyer. But if the title company has not started the title work on the first buyer because the parties were first waiting to see if the parties could resolve any objections the buyer had to inspections or the seller's disclosure statement, then there would be no need for a termination agreement. Now everybody just breathe. I know this is a real deviation from the way things have been done, and it may not work to delay the title work on certain properties and with certain title companies. The title company may need every minute they can have to get that title work done by the closing date. But in other cases, that may not be the case, and the title company could wait. Maybe they could wait until the TOM fee is delivered. That's usually within the first 2 days of the contract. That way, if a buyer doesn't deliver the TOM fee timely and the seller terminates the contract for that reason, no title work has begun and no termination agreement will be necessary. Now, it may get a little more complicated if we're waiting to start the work until the buyer gets through the TOM fee inspection period, which is when earnest money would be due, because this may be 10 days or 2 weeks, which again may make it difficult or impossible for the title company to get the title work done in time for closing. But then again, this depends on how far out the closing has been set, what kind of property we're dealing with, and the title company's workload. But let's say you can wait to begin the title work until the buyer has gotten through the TOM fee inspection period and is ready to deposit the earnest money, and the deal does terminate over inspections. Then there is no earnest money distribution form necessary and no need for termination agreement. The parties just walk away from each other. So it will be important for the responsible party to communicate with the title company to determine when the title policy commitment will need to be ordered to comply with the terms of the contract. But the options are available to delay the ordering of the title commitment if that works for that particular transaction. On a side note, there was some concern that lenders would not be able to formulate a loan estimate without numbers from the title company. We have spoken with many lenders on this subject and have found this not to be a problem. Before I go, I want to mention a few other issues. The Forms Committee did revisit the option of crediting the TOM fee at closing, but decided not to make that change, for reasons stated in the previous video. In addition, in speaking with lenders, we confirmed that if the TOM fee is credited, the lender will be required to trace those funds. Also, our TOM fee made it back to Washington, D.C. last week, where a relationship manager for Fannie Mae's National Customer Delivery Team had some questions about the fee. Despite something similar being used in other markets, it was the first he or his risk assessment team had heard of such a concept. After corresponding with him over the week, he informed me that his risk partners had advised him that they will not be requiring the TOM fee to be included in the funds to close calculation. However, he did comment that his lenders would be mindful as to how the TOM fee may impact the borrower's ability to close the transaction. But he agreed that if the TOM fee was in the $50 to $500 range, it was not likely to be an issue. Which brings me to my next point, the dollar amount of this TOM fee. As stated in my last video, the TOM fee is not intended to be in the thousands of dollars. In Texas and North Carolina, 2 states that use similar fee, the amount is between $50 and $350, typically. I have heard concerns that sellers will be unreasonable in their requests, asking for buyers to pay the equivalent of a mortgage payment or some other high dollar amount. The Forms Committee did consider using the term nominal, which essentially means a very small amount, but opted not to place those types of constraints on the party's right to negotiate. Still, it will be up to the listing broker to explain to the seller that the TOM fee is not intended to be a high dollar amount. Remind the seller that until recently, all the contract provided for was earnest money, which would be refunded in its entirety to the buyer if the buyer walked away after inspections, leaving the seller with nothing. Here they get a TOM fee. Remind the seller that they may still take backup offers on the property during the TOM fee inspection period. If a seller wishes to sell and a buyer wishes to buy, they will come to an agreement on the amount of the TOM fee. And in conclusion, I will remind you that the TOM fee is not required, but it should be the buyer and the seller who decide whether or not to use the TOM fee, not the brokers. It is your role to understand the pros and the cons of the TOM fee and to explain those to your customer and clients. I covered those in more detail in my last video. Thank you for watching today, and please call or email me with any questions.